Yeah, by tomorrow we'll actually set up access for you, all of you, and so as discussed in the earlier classes, like first we'll start with a SQL, and then we'll proceed further on the understanding about the complete ETL testing concepts and all. So by tomorrow we'll communicate the actual class timings. There are since because it's a second class. Now there are some still confusion, like when we have to start the class and with the different participants and all. So I think will regularize the class timings, and we'll make sure that nobody waits longer time than the communicated hours. And we will not make. I mean to say, will not make you to wait for a longer time as such. So just to start with, you know the basic things now to do. So we'll start with the basic SQL query. We'll start with the basic SQL queries, and just go ahead with your other things, right? So yeah, all of you can mute yourself, like, because there is a lot of noise which is coming, and whoever joins, please make sure you mute it so that you'll not have any disturbance from the others. So I'm going to show you the regular queries now. We're going to log into the schema, wherein we're going to log into the schema, and then we'll start practicing the question. So whatever the schema that we are logging in, and similar type of a schema will be set up even in your machines also for a practice. So suppose, let's say there is a schema called as your name itself, or my name, and I have a schema called as a Karthik. Under this I have a different tables, and data is also populated into these tables. So we have a tables like employees, and we have a tables like departments, and we have jobs, job history, locations. Likewise, we have a different tables, and all these tables, data is also populated. Data is also populated into these tables. So we have a data also present, and these tables we are going to use it for learning our SQL queries first, and how to retrieve the data and all. We'll see it. So I'll show you once again. Assume that even when you go to the ETL testing process also, there will be a tables which will be created, and the data will be loaded by your ETL tools. All you need to do is that just match the data with respect to all these things. So now let me just show you how to create a connection here in using it. So let's say you're creating the connection now. I want to connect to the user called as a SQL for a ETL testing practice. So I'm defining the connection as ETL testing, and the username is SQL1, and enter accordingly the password. So if you would like to save the password for further use, you can save the password and select the basic and enter the name of the host. Host is nothing but the where your database is installed. My database is installed in this IP address. Either you can provide the IP address of the this one, or you can just use it. So the service name, and then the service name or the database name, both are the same. So try to test it. So it says a success, and then save it. So I just want to verify whether we have a tables which are available in this schema. So when you expand it, you'll be able to see the list of object categories here. There is some noise coming up. If you don't mind, if you can mute, that would be helpful. Please use a microphone to mute yourself. And okay, so we have different tables which are available: bonus, and then the countries, departments, EMP, employee history, employees. These are all the different tables which are available in this SQL1 schema. So I'm going to use this schema for practicing the SQL. So if you see, all these tables are available. All these tables are already created, and the data is also populated. So how the data is populated into these tables? Yesterday we have seen how to create a simple table, and how to load the data into these tables by using an insert statement. So similarly, we have created all these tables and then added the data to all these tables using an insert script. So I'm going to show you now how to use the different queries to understand. See, whenever you're writing a query, one thing that we have to make sure is that you need to understand the structure of the table that is being created and that is being already exist. So how do you identify the structure of the table? So describe is a command to find out the structure of the table. Suppose, let's say, if I want to know the structure of the table and what is the data type of each column in this table, so describe DESC, that is a command, and this one is a table name, so describe employees. So try and execute. So this will give you the structure of the table. So that is your employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number. These are all the columns, and not null for now. You can just ignore it, and you can also identify the, you can also find out the data type of each column, what is being joined. What is being added here. Employee ID, first name, last name, email, phone number. These are all the different columns. So you need to find out the structure of all these tables, because we are going to use these tables extensively for learning the SQL query, select queries. So I would like to even identify the structure of this table. So that is your department structure, so which has 4 columns: department ID, department name, manager ID, and all. So you need to know all these table level, column names, table column names, so that we can start understanding the SQL queries. So first, as discussed in the earlier class, we will be concentrating more on how to write a select statement to read the data. Now assume that the tables are present, data is present. All you need to write a SQL queries to read the data from database. So how do you read the data? That is by using a select statement. So we'll understand how what are the different ways that we can write a select statement to retrieve the data from using this. So let's say if you want to understand, if you want to retrieve, see, since we have a very basic learners here, so we'll go from very basic level to understand all these. Suppose, let's say, now I know that there is an employees table which is present in my schema or the user where I'm actually logged in, and I want to retrieve the data from employees table. So first, a simple command is that, so you can write whenever you want to retrieve all the columns. Yeah. So if you don't mind, can you please mute yourself, all of you? And there is a still noise which is coming up. There will be a microphone symbol. Okay. You just click on that. That will mute yourself. On the GoToMeeting window itself, there will be a microphone symbol. Please mute it. Okay, 1 second, please. Okay, so if you want to retrieve all the columns from the table, so we'll always mention select start from whatever the table name. So table name is employees table, and then as part of this, use a semicolon as a best practice. So from specifies from which table you want to retrieve the data. Here star specifies, star means
muted.
Star specifies all the columns to be all the columns to be retrieved from the database, and from specifies from which
Unmuted.
execute. So whenever you want to execute the whenever you want to execute the data, whenever you want to retrieve the data from this, or whenever you want to execute the query, so the command execute is, you can use Control Enter to retrieve the data from this, or you can try and use this one, that is your run statement. So this will retrieve you the data. So if you see, it has retrieved all the columns. You have employee ID column, first name, last name, email, phone number, hire date, and job ID, salary, and commission percentage. So all these columns and the manager ID and department ID, everything is being retrieved from this. So that's how select a simple query. So select is used to read the data from single table or a multiple tables, and from specifies the from which table you want to retrieve the data. Start specifies the all the columns to be read from the database. So that's how you can write a simple select statement to retrieve the data. Suppose, let's say, now I don't want to retrieve all the columns. I want to retrieve only the few columns. Let's say I want to retrieve the last name, and I want to retrieve the phone number, maybe the job ID, and then the salary. So whenever you want to retrieve the selective columns from this one, so how do you do that? So to do that, now you can use the column names here. Select, let's say, use the column name. So that is your last name, and you have the column that is your salary, let's say, and you also have the column name job ID. So whenever you are retrieving the multiple columns, so keep all the columns, keep all the columns one after the other separated by a comma. Whenever you are retrieving, all these columns are part of which table? These are the part of employees table. So from employees. So try and use from employees. When you try and execute, this will give you only the selected columns. So whenever you want to retrieve the selected columns, keep the list of column names one after the other by comma, and then try to retrieve the data. This will give you only the columns which you have included. So this is always the best practice to write. We don't generally write the query to retrieve all the columns which are available in the table. So we'll always be selective. So this will always select the specific columns to retrieve the data from it. Now if you see, it is displaying only the last name, salary, and the job ID. So there are a few important things that we have to understand using an SQL. So your SQL is not a case sensitive language. So which mean, like, you can write the, we can write the query in uppercase, we can write the query in lowercase, we can write the query in the mixed case, any case you can write it. There is no, but whatever the data that you are representing, suppose let's say if I'm representing the last name value or a date value, that is a case sensitive. We'll understand what do you mean by data here. And you can split the query into one or more lines. So it is not necessary that you have to write the complete query in the single line and then execute it. So you can split the query into multiple lines. Query into multiple lines. So, but you cannot split the keywords, something like this. Let's say you have select query, something like this, and I'm splitting my from keyword fr in the first line, om in the second line. I'm trying to execute the query. This is an invalid query. You cannot split the keywords. You can break the query into multiple lines, but you cannot split the keywords into multiple lines. So usually the clauses and all will be placed in the different lines. What do you mean by a clause here? Clause is nothing but a from clause, where clause, order by clause. These are all the different clauses which we use. We'll understand one by one in the coming chapters. So order by clause, and you also have a group by clause, having clause, and all those things. So this generally when you are writing a query, so you'll place them into different lines to view that. And it is always a good practice to keep the semicolon at the end of the query so that you can execute it easily by using a control enter or whatever the command that you can use, and it will execute only that SQL statement instead of executing all those things. So SQL, very important thing that you have to understand, that SQL is not a case sensitive language. So that's how you can display. Let's try and understand. Now we have seen how to write a simple select query to retrieve the data, and let's try and understand how to perform arithmetic operations on the arithmetic operations on the number columns or the numeric columns. So let's say you have a requirement where you have to increase the salary, or you want to calculate the salary of an employee, incremented salary of an employee, all those things, then we'll use a arithmetic operations. So these arithmetic operations, for now we are learning how to perform arithmetic operations on the numeric columns. Numeric means something like a salary column and the commission column, all those things. So if you want to check what is the data type of the column, you cannot perform arithmetic operations on the character columns and a Boolean column. Suppose let's say here employee is a numeric, which you can perform, and here the salary is a numeric column, which you can perform, and the commission percentage is also a numeric column, so which you can perform. So numeric column, how to perform arithmetic operations on these numeric columns, that we'll understand now. So what are the numeric operators? What are the arithmetic operators? So plus, I, minus, and the multiplication is represented as a star, and then you have it as a division. So we are going to understand how the arithmetic operations performed on this. Suppose let's say you want to increment the salary by 1,000. So this is the, if you see the salary column which is available in the employees table, this salary column represents what is the monthly salary of an employee. So how do you increment the salary? Let's say I want to increment the monthly salary of each employee by 1,000. So how do you increment the salary? By using it. Incrementing is nothing but adding a salary. So how do you do that? Let's say I want to retrieve the last name, and I also want to retrieve the job ID column. It's not a case sensitive, so I can write in even in the lower case as well. So job ID. Let's say this is a actual salary column, and I want to increment the salary by 1,000. So how do you do that? You can apply arithmetic operators directly on this. So salary plus 1,000 from what is the table which all these columns contain. So you need to use a employees table. So use a semicolon, try and execute, see the difference between this column and this column. So when you try and execute, so you have a salary which is at 24,000, and when I have added 1,000, it is being incremented by 25,000, 17,000, 18,000, 9,000, 10,000, likewise. So whenever you hear, if you have to increment it, so you can easily increment it by that one. Similarly, you can also perform other arithmetic operators like subtract, multiplication, and division. Suppose let's say if you have to calculate the annual salary of an employee. So how do you calculate annual salary? It will be monthly salary into 12. So how can I do that? So to calculate annual salary, let's check. So multiplication operator is replaced by star, and I want to multiply that by 12. So when you try and execute, so this will give you the annual salary of an employee. So when you see that annual salary of an employee will be displayed. So 24,000 into 12, 9,000 into 12, 6,000 into 12. So all these values have been displayed. Now let's say you have a particular requirement. So I want to increment the salary by 1,000 and calculate the annual salary. So it's like I want to increment the annuals. This is a monthly salary. I want to increment the monthly salary by 1,000 and calculate the annual salary. So how do you generally how do you calculate this annual salary here? Let's try and check. So I want to increment the monthly salary first of all. So let's say now you have salary plus 100. This will increment the salary by 1,000 for each month, and I want to calculate the annual salary. So I'll use 12 into salary. Now let's try and execute whether we'll get a desired result here. So observe, we are actually using both multiplication operator as well as addition operator both together in a single expression. So try and execute this. So what will be the output? Let's try and understand. See here, you have 6,000, and so if I increment the salary by 1,000, it will be 7,000 into 12. it should be 84,000, but it is being displayed as 73,000 here, which it is there. So how do you it's 73,000. Um, when you try and see what is going wrong here is that, so we heard about Bodmas rule. So in a sense, like when you have a multiple arithmetic operators which are being used, so which one will get executed first? First the multiplication operator will get executed, then the addition. So since the multiplication operator is getting executed first you're multiplying the salary. I mean, first it is multiplying the salary and then incrementing the salary by 1,000. But my requirement is that I want to increment the salary by 1,000 first and then multiply this. So in order to override the precedence, so arithmetic operators first, the first bracket will be evaluated, then the multiplication operator, then the division, addition, and then the subtraction. So this is how the arithmetic operator evaluation will happen. Suppose if you want to override the precedence of the operators. Now here I want to override the precedence. So how can I do that? So which you can write a query here saying 12. So I want this to be executed first. So I'm going to include this in the parenthesis. So when I execute this query, since the bracket will be evaluated first it will increment the salary, then multiply that by the 12. So try and execute this. So now here you have 24,000. So plus 1,000, which it has become 25,000 into 12, that has taken into 3 lakhs. See here also 6,000 plus 1,000, 7,000 into 12, 84,000. So likewise, whenever you want to override the precedence of the operators, always you have to mention that in the parenthesis to do that. So that's how you can override the precedence of the operators in this one. And a next one that you have to understand is about understanding the null value. What do you mean by a null value? So how do you define a null value in Oracle? So null value means nothing. So there is nothing in, while inserting a data, if you're not providing a value for a particular column, that becomes a nullable. So you cannot define a null as a blank space. We cannot call it as it is not a blank space. So you cannot call that as it is not a blank space, and it is also not a, zero. You cannot even consider that as a zero. So it is not even a zero. It is not a zero even. So null means there is nothing. So you can call something as unassigned value. Unassigned value means you have not assigned any value to that column, then that is called as a null. So it is not a blank space, it is not a zero, it is an unassigned value or a value which is not applicable. So there is no data in it, so it is not applicable, then that is defined as a null value. So let's try and check how the null value will be stored in the table level. So let me just first try and execute this query from the SQL plus prompt. So try and log in here. So go to CMD command prompt. So I want to log into my SQL1 user to my database. So if you have Oracle client which is installed, you can also use SQL plus prompt. So try and log in here. So it will go to SQL1 and enter the password. And I want to execute the query here to understand how the null value is stored. There is a column called as a commission percentage which is available in the employees table. Let's try and retrieve the data: last name, job ID, salary, and the commission percentage. So select. So when you want to execute the query, you can also observe this: last name, job ID, salary. And let's say I'm retrieving the other columns such as commission percentage from, let's say you have employees table. So whenever you are executing a query, either you can use a semicolon or a forward slash to execute the query in the SQL plus. So I want to use a forward slash. So try and see here. See, there is a last name, but there is no value which is displayed here. Everything is I mean, everything is not applicable value. So you're not able to find what is the value which is available for all these employees commission, which means this is called as a null. You don't have anything. So, but there is a value present for some other employees. So if you see, for this employee there is a value, for this employees there is a value which is present, but all the other employees there is no value which is present. That is called as an unassigned value, which means they have not, I mean, while inserting a data into this employees table, we have not provided any value. That's why this is, this is become a null. So you can execute the same query here and then check how this query will work in the SQL developer. See, SQL developer, in SQL developer, for our understanding, since there is no data which is available in the commission percentage, SQL developer will display it as a null within the brackets. It doesn't mean that we have something called as a null string which is being stored here. So if you try and edit, there is nothing. So if you try and, just for our understanding, so whenever it is not applicable value or unassigned value which is available, then it will display it as a null. So when you are using, why we are actually discussing a null value here more importantly, because you cannot perform arithmetic operations on the null value. So it's something like, let's say I'm trying to add null with 100, null with 1000 or something, it will be evaluated to null. Any arithmetic operator on the null value will be evaluated to null. So it can be null into 0. So even this will be evaluated to null. So if you try and use null minus 100 or whatever, that will be evaluated null. And you cannot even compare null value to null value. This also you cannot do that. That is also wrong. I mean, it cannot compare null equal to null. So you cannot perform arithmetic operations as well as you cannot even compare a null value to a null value. So whenever you are performing arithmetic operations on a column which is having a null value, it will be evaluated to completely null. So how do you, let's try and see, there is a commission percentage. So if you see in this commission percentage column, we just have something called as a commission percentage which is available 0.4, 0.3 and all. Now let's say we have, let me just try and calculate the monthly commission. Monthly commission in the sense, let's say this is a salary and this is a percentage of the commission what the employees will receive. So what is the commission, monthly commission is that salary into commission percentage will give you the monthly commission of an employee. So let's try and start here. So let's say I want to calculate salary into commission percentage. So this will give you this value. So I just want to show you how the calculation is being evaluated here. That's why I'm retrieving even these columns, salary, commission percentage, as well as the salary into commission percentage. So let's try and understand how this monthly commission will be evaluated. See here, 24,000 into null, which is being evaluated as a null value. So if you see 4,200 into null, it is also being evaluated as a null. So now go on and then find out here. So let's say 9,500 here into 0.35. This value is evaluated to 3325 in this. So that's how you can define, any operator on a null value. I mean, any arithmetic operator on a null value will be evaluated to null. So always you should avoid performing arithmetic operations on the null value. So that's how you can define it. So how to handle the null values, that we'll understand in the maybe in the third chapter when we go to the advanced queries by using the functions. We'll understand how to use a null value, how to replace the null value when we are performing arithmetic expressions. So for now we can understand how a null value will be evaluated to this. So this is just a simple things about the arithmetic operators. So I just want to hear, like, if you have any questions so far what we have discussed, then we will move on to the next example. So that is, the next example is about how to provide an alias for a column, right? So any questions so far? See, when we are going through, even if you have a questions in between, you can always stop me, and so that I'll try and answer that question and then move ahead with the next one. So next thing that we are going to discuss is about the providing an alias. So how to provide an alias for a column. So what do you mean by an alias? Alias means, see here, so whenever you try and execute, see this one here, complete expression is being displayed in the header. Suppose if you are using a salary into commission percentage, this is a complete expression, and this complete value will be displayed here. So salary into commission percentage, complete value is being displayed in this one. So instead of displaying the complete expression here in the header, if you want to provide another name for a column, that is called as an alias. Instead of displaying the column name completely, I just want to provide an alias. Alias can be provided in three ways. So either you can use a as keyword to provide an alias. Suppose let's say I want to display the last name as a name. So just use the name here. And similarly, let's say you want to, if you would like to use a job ID with a different job ID name, so you can just use a job ID column. And you have a salary into commission percentage, so whatever the value that you have, so this salary into commission percentage column, let's say I want to call it as a monthly commission. So you can also, either you can use a as keyword, or you can provide a space after the column name, that you can also call it as this one. So as salary, I want to call the commission percentage as commission, or you can also provide a space after that. So that is called as a monthly commission. Let's say I want to call this as a monthly commission. So now instead of displaying the complete expression, it will use the alias column and then display it. So see here, commission percentage is being displayed as a commission, and total salary into commission percentage column is being displayed as a monthly commission in using it. So that's how you can try and provide an alias column, alias for a particular column. Suppose let's say you have alias for a particular column. So suppose let's say there is a space which you have to provide. Means within my alias itself I have a space. You're providing a space here and then providing an alias. Even within your alias also you have a space. So how to avoid that? So when you try and execute, it will throw the error because it cannot recognize where is your alias is actually starting and ending and all. So whenever you have a space in your alias word, always you have to enclose always you have to enclose in the double quotes. So I have in the monthly commission here, I have a value monthly commission. I have a space which has been there. That's why I'm providing this in the double quotes. So whatever the value that you enclose in the double quotes, that becomes a case sensitive as well. So if you write here in the uppercase, it will display in the uppercase. If you write in the lowercase, it will display in the lowercase. But if you see, I have written an alias here in the lowercase, but it is being displayed as uppercase here. By default, generally the headers will be displayed in the uppercase. If you want to display them in the, in the case sensitive format, then you can always enclose them in the double quotes. So whenever you have an alias word which is having a space in between, always provide in the double quotes and then do that. So that's how you can provide an alias for a particular column. So even here also it is a similar example where you are calculating the annual salary. So annual salary into 12, that becomes an annual salary here. So annual salary is having a space, so we have enclosed in the double quotes here. So that's how you can provide an alias for a particular column. So whenever you're using an expression, it's always a practice is to use the double quotes for. And now let's say Next one is about the concatenation operator. So what do you mean by concatenation? Concatenation is nothing but the appending the data or combining the two columns into this. So how do you use a concatenation operator? So there is an operator which we use for concatenating the columns in SQL, that is called as a double pipe symbol. Pipe symbol, this is called as a concatenation operator. Now, if you see the employees table, there is a first name and last name, and I just want to concatenate the first name and last name column and display that as a full name. So how would I concatenate it? So how does a concatenation operator works? Let me just pull up the write the query here. So select, let's say I want to concatenate the last name with the first name, last name with the first name, and I also want to retrieve the salary. And let's say you want to even retrieve the job ID as well from, what is the table name? From employees. So you're trying to combine the last name with the first name. Let's say I want to provide an alias for complete this as a full name. So I don't want to give the space between the full name. So this I've just provided. So now the last name and first name will be concatenated and it will be displayed as a full name. So try and execute this. So this will give you, there is a employee King Stephen, so it is being concatenated. Kocher, Nina, Dehan, Lex, Arnold Alexander, see here, Ernst, Bruce, Austin, David. So everything is concatenated. So there is no, but we are not able to make out, I mean, like where the first name is, I mean, where the last name is ending and where the first name is starting. We cannot make out this if you are combining this without any operator. Suppose, let's say, now you have a query like I want to separate the last name and first name by the comma. So I want to write it by using the comma. How would you use that? So whenever you are providing the character input in the SQL, always you have to enclose in the single quotes. So do remember. Now I want to provide a comma between the last name and the first name. So how would I use that? So you can use a double concatenation operator here. So here I can provide that within the single quotes. I just want to provide a comma in between. So when you try and execute, there will be a comma which will be available in between my last name and the first name. Now see here, there is a comma which is appearing. Suppose, let's say I want to display the space after the last name and space before the last name. So how would I do that? So that can also be done. So just provide a space here and space here. Space is also a character, right? So I'm providing a space, comma, and then the space. So when you try and use, now if you try and use this, so now this also is the same way. So where you have a space. So whatever the character that you want to concatenate, you can always provide the character in the single quotes. So now let's say I want to display the employee and their job ID. So I just want to append the string. I want to display something like King is a president, Kocher is a vice president, Hanald is IT programmer, Ernst is IT programmer, something like that. I just want to display. So I want to append the string called as EZA. So in between last name and first name, I just want to append this one. So I want to display the last name of an employee and then the job. What is the job ID of it? So how do you use it? I can combine something like this, last name. Let's say you want to concatenate the value that is easy. There should be a space before and after. So that's why I've given a space. And then concatenate it. Use another concatenation operator. Now let's say you have something called as a job ID. So just try and use job ID from, you have, that is called as a employees table. And I want to provide an alias as an employee details. So just try and use employee details. Now try and execute this here. So let me just use this. So which you have. Now see here, Abel is a sales representative, Andy Atkinson is a clerk, Austin is an IT programmer, PRF. So all these things. So you can combine, you can add any operator, any string in between that. So whenever you're providing the character literal values that must be enclosed in the single quote, each character string is output once the row is returned. So last name and the job ID, this is your employee details. So that's how you can use it. Now the question is, suppose let's say you have a character string something like this. Now you are entering the data by using these values. So you're entering the data in terms of this. So suppose let's say you want to, you want to append the string something which is like apostrophe s. So I want to append a string something like it's, let's say I want to display something like this, department and its manager ID. Let's say I want to display the administration and its manager ID. I want to display this, its manager ID, let's say 100 or something. So I want to display the output something like this. If you see the department table contains two columns, something like a department name. So when you go to the data column here, you will be seeing the department name as well as a manager ID. So we just want to tell this departments and its manager ID. So you want to display something. But what is special in this is you have to display even a single quote. But here, if you represent a single quote, that will be treated as a string. It is a part of the string. So how can I add the string kind of strings which are having an apostrophe? So how would I do that? So to do that, you need to follow this logic, or you need to follow the quotation operator. What does it is? I have to add this content to the department name. That is my requirement. Suppose let's say what is the name of the department, that is your department name, and I want to concatenate its manager ID. So let's say its manager ID, there is apostrophe s. So if you try and use its manager ID, and I want to give a space before, after, before, but this complete thing is not being taken as a proper string. So how would I do that? Add an extra single quote. If you just want to add apostrophe which is part of a string, add an extra single quote so that that will be taken part of the string here. It's manager ID, and I want to display the manager ID as well. So just try and display the manager ID. Where these columns are present, these columns are present in my departments table, not in the employees table. Try and execute this. Try and execute this will give you the, see now, administration and its manager ID is 200. So if you just want to display this as with the alias, so I'll call it as department details. So try and execute. Now you are provided an alias here. Provided an alias. Try and this one will give you this one. So administration and its manager ID. So whenever you have this kind of a scenario, either you can go by this way, or you can also use another type of an operator that is called as a quotation operator. So what do you mean by Q operator? Q is nothing but a quotation operator. See, instead of I have a similar kind of an example. Instead of providing all these things here, like let's say now this is a string that which you have to concatenate. So what you can do is you can just enclose that in the square parenthesis and use the Q operator here. Let's say if you have a Q operator and just enclose that in the single quotes, that's it. It will be taken care. So when you use this complete thing, whatever you have enclosed will be treated as a string. It doesn't mind how many apostrophes you have, how many single quotes you are using, all those things. Quotation operator is to miss that quote. So there is no space. If you just want to give a space here, just give the space here. So try and execute. So it will give you this. So this operator is called as a Q operator or the quotation operator in using that. So that's how you can use the Q operator to display the single quote in the string what you are appending by using the concatenation operator. So I hope you understand the difference here. I mean, both are the same, but these are the two different ways that you can actually use use the statements to append the strings which has a single quote in their content. So that is one thing which we have. So what do you mean by a duplicate record here? What do you mean by a duplicate? So duplicate means a record which is being repeated in a column, that is called as a duplicate. So let's say I want to retrieve the department ID. Let's say I'm retrieving only one column, department ID, from employees table. I'm retrieving the department ID from employees. So when you try and execute this, so what will happen? If you see the department is being repeated, 90 is being repeated, 60 is being repeated, 100 is being repeated, because for a 60 you have this many employees in the employees table, and for a department you have this many employees in the department employees table. So if you want to eliminate the duplicate records, eliminate means displaying only once. So I don't want to display 90 multiple times. This, whenever you want to identify a distinct records or eliminate the duplicate records, we'll apply a distinct operator. So distinct department ID. So when you try and use distinct department ID, so this will eliminate the duplicate records into this. So try and see here. Now I don't have records which are being displayed. It's displaying only once. So distinct is a keyword which operator which you can call is operator which is used to eliminate the duplicate records in a particular column. So suppose, let's say you have another query. Let me just try and give you the how the duplicate works with the multiple columns here. So let's say you have a job ID and you have something called as a department ID from, let's say, employees table. So try and execute this. So see the value. So this is duplicate. You can call this as a duplicate record, whereas IT programmer and the 60 both are displaying. And if you consider these two things, it is not a duplicate record because the job ID is different. So when you try and apply the distinct operator, it will apply the distinct operator on the combination of both the columns. It will not apply on the single column. It will apply on all the columns. Now try and execute, see the difference. So let me just, let's say we are ordering the data here, and marketing manager. Okay, so if you see this, you cannot consider it as a duplicate record because job ID is different. Suppose, let's say I want to keep the job ID later after the department, so that makes much sense. So to do this query, so try and execute now. So let's say if I want to sort data or something, this I cannot consider it as a duplicate. It is duplicate with respect to the department ID, but if you see the job ID is different. Even this scenario, clerk and peon manager. So this is a different record. So when it is eliminating the duplicate records, it will take all the columns into consideration and eliminates the duplicate records using that. So that is how you can use a distinct operator which eliminates the duplicate values, which eliminates the duplicate records in a particular table. Or even if you just want to assign a salary column as well, you can also do that. So this will also consider a salary column and then eliminate the duplicate records. So that is how, that is the overall things about the first chapter. And I'll also tell you what do you mean by a script and what is the difference between the SQL and the iSQL plus. See, the SQL plus is like an environment. So this is called as a SQL plus environment where you can actually execute the queries here and then see. So SQL is like a language which follows the different keywords for manipulating the data and for creating the table definitions. And SQL plus is an environment. So this is your SQL plus environment. When I'm connecting to this, I've used SQL plus and then connected to this. If you see SQL plus SQL1 at ABC, which is nothing but I've used SQL plus environment and then did it. So this is like an Oracle proprietary environment. You will not have this type of an environment to execute the queries for other databases. For them, for that there will be a different UI where you can actually execute the queries. So you can also run the queries on the browser, but from generally in the real time we don't use browsers to execute the queries, and we'll always use the tools to execute the queries, that is like your SQL developer and all will be used. And we have already seen this, how to display the structure of the table and how to display the structure of the table. And there is something called as a script. I mean, interacting with a script. So what do you mean by a script? Script is nothing but a group of SQL statements together is called as a script. Suppose, let's say I want to execute these two SQL statements as part of one query or a one file that is called as an SQL script. Suppose, let's say, right click on it, let's say open SQL worksheet and open it, and I'm saving it into a particular value. Let's say I have a multiple SQL statements here and each of them is separated by the comma, and then this is called as a script. Let's say I want to save here and I call this as a lab1.sql or lab1. So always save the SQL scripts as a .sql extension. Anyway, it will take it when you try to save that lab1. Now this SQL is being saved and I want to run this. How can I run the script? So if you want to run it, you can run it from here also. Use F5 to execute the script. Now there are two queries which are executed and the data is being displayed. But if you want to run the script from the SQL prompt, so as a tester you might not be going to use it, but as part of the syllabus let's learn it. So if you want to run a script, you need to know where the script is available. My script is available in the ETL folder. So this is my folder. So let me just use @ right click on it and then paste. Let's say I want to execute @ single quotes, provide the absolute path. So what is the file name? lab1.sql and then close the single quotes. So when you try and run this will open this file and start executing one by one SQL statement, which is part of this. We have two SQL statements and the two SQL statements will be executed. So this is how you can execute the group of SQL statements together as part of a script. That is called as a script. So you can save it always. Whenever you do that, you can save and then run as part of the script. So that's how you can define that's how you can define the different SQL statements as part of a script and run it. That completes your chapter number 1, how to write the basic select statements and how to use a concatenation operator and how to eliminate the duplicate records and how to use the arithmetic operators with respect to this one. So if you have any questions so far what we have discussed, that we will see. And let's try and any questions so far you can go ahead now.
Yeah, Karthik, this is Nitisha speaking.
Yeah, Nitisha.
Yeah, I just want to know, do we write more scripts or do we write more queries as a tester?
As a tester, you always write a query only. You're not going to write a script as well, because when you write a test case, right, so all the test cases will contain each and every individual query which is associated with it. For each test case, we'll write a query, not a script. Just as part of the syllabus, I just shown you what is a script means. That's it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Karthik, Deepan here.
Yes.
Karthik, can you send me the document to all that is really helpful to understand?
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep sending you all these things on a day-to-day basis. I'll communicate to you all the documents, and we'll also send you the details for installations, because you have to practice with these things at the earliest. So we'll also send you all these details. So make sure that you set these things very early. Admin team will follow up with you and they'll install the things. Okay. Okay, that's it I have.
Karthik, I have a question.
Yes, Vijay.
Yeah. It's not about the queries. I saw in the SQL Plus, what's the difference between SQL and iSQL Plus. It said it's centrally loaded, does not have to be implemented on each machine. What does that mean? Yeah, the last one, centrally loaded, does not have to be implemented on each machine.
It's actually a client environment. So whenever you want to make use of this SQL Plus environment, you can install the client and make use of this environment. It is not necessary to be set up in each machine where you are executing the queries. Here, I have a database, so I'm able to use a SQL Plus environment. Suppose if you want to make use of this SQL Plus environment, you can just straight away install Oracle client and then start using SQL Plus environment. You don't need to install the SQL database for it to work with it.
Oh,
so
it's about the database. Okay, okay. I thought it's the client. Anyway, client has to be installed on each machine, right?
Yes, yes, that's true.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay then. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow. There is some confusion with the timings and all. I'll ask the team to send you a proper mail so that we'll not have any confusion. So as I said, if possible, we'll mention in the mail from tomorrow. We'll try to have 1.5 hour class. So since a few people wants to join few people have to join the projects very early. So we'll try to see that. Whether it will happen from tomorrow or from day after tomorrow, I'll clearly mention in the mail, and you can just see your mail and then log into the class. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Sujata, you can just respond to my mail. Okay, she has already left. Thanks.
No, I'm here, Karthik. Yeah.
You guys can respond to my mail. I have actually dropped you a mail, and you can respond to that.
Yeah, I saw that I need to talk to you, but you seem to be busy. After that, you have another class, right?
Yeah. So you can just quickly call me now, and
okay. Yeah, I'll call you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.